This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is Sean from SGT Report, the Corporate Propaganda Antidote. Sean, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for asking me to come on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you on. Can you tell us quickly why you started SGT Report?
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to bore everybody, but I have a journalism degree, and I've been in sort of the broadcast advertising business for, I guess close to 20 years now. And when I finally woke up to this false right-left paradigm 6-7 years ago, I was disgusted, and I felt like I had a voice. I certainly had a point of view, and I wanted to share that. So I started a YouTube channel in 2009, but I didn't even put up my first YouTube video until 2010. And that's kind of where it all took off. And then I put up a website, not expecting that to really have much traction, and it turned into something much bigger than I thought or dreamed it ever would. And I guess it just goes to prove that if you're a decent human being who cares about liberty and freedom, you can do interesting things and people will listen, because, the alternative media, as you know, Mark, is growing by leaps and bounds as the mainstream mockingbird media collapses and loses its audience. Because as much as we might malign the American people as being a group of sheeple, large and large, people are waking up, and CNN is losing viewers in droves. And that's the good news.
That is good news. The Rolling Stones reporter Michael Hastings was recently killed in a single-car accident. He's the reporter that brought an end to General Stanley McChrystal's career by outing his affair. The engine of his car was found 100 feet away from the site of the collision. Does that sound consistent with a head-on collision into a tree to you?
No, and it's very troubling. I think that, after the unexpected death of Andrew Breitbart, a lot of us started to wonder, what is really going on behind the scenes. And you don't have to dig very deep into government-sponsored assassinations to come up with names like journalist Gary Webb, Oklahoma City Cop of the Year Terrence Yankee, CIA Section Chief Carney. If you don't know who that is, Google that story. They assassinated him in broad daylight. Pat Tillman, who was actually the cover-up of the assassination of Pat Tillman in Afghanistan, was under the umbrella of General McChrystal. He helped cover that up. So what a small world to know that Michael Hastings helped bring down McChrystal. McChrystal has been involved in other government-sponsored assassinations, allegedly. There's also the assassination recently of Chris Kyle, the American sniper. And, I was no fan of Chris Kyle for the way he went after and I think lied about Jesse Ventura. But it just goes to show, if you serve this evil system, even guys like Chris Kyle, who are paraded out there as heroes, and I'm not sure how people feel about, assassinating people via sniper rifle, if that constitutes being a hero. I think if you think these wars criminal as I do, you might have a problem with that, take exception to that label for him. But he ended up dead at the hands of this system, in my opinion, at the hands of this system. And then there's the case of Michael Hastings, who is, by all accounts, a safe driver, and he had tweeted or emailed an attorney at WikiLeaks just hours before his death, expressing his concern that the FBI was investigating him because he was going to break huge new news about CIA, NSA, eavesdropping, and crimes. And now he's dead. And I'll tell you what, if there's any chilling effect, if there's anything that is a danger to what we have left of as a republic, if there's anything at all, it's government-sponsored assassination of whistleblowers and truth tellers, because nothing will shut people up quicker than watching their friends and colleagues and those whom they respect, those who have courage, dying unexpectedly. So I think it looks like it was an assassination. I can't explain how the engine of his 2013, I think it was a brand new Mercedes, passed through the tree that he is said to have crashed into and blown up. As you said, Mark, the engine was found, 50, 60 yards away from the car, and the police say no need for an investigation. I don't know. Anybody who's thinking must be scratching their heads, and I know a lot of people are concerned. What's your take on that?
It doesn't sound right. I'm not a physicist, but I don't understand how the back of the car can be missing from a front end impact, and how the engine can end up 100 feet away. We seem to have moved on past the fact that our government is tracking every phone call, email, Skype call, and Facebook post through Prism. We're more focused on where in the world is Edward Snowden. Are the American people okay with the NSA snooping?
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, yeah, I'll give you a real world example though that indicates that maybe they are. I had a drink with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a while, and she and I had worked together for years, and we all stay in touch. And her husband and she sometimes will go out with my wife and I, and so we connected, and we were talking about a number of different things, and I brought up the NSA wiretapping, and her response to that was, because she knows my take on the sheeple, and most people aren't paying attention, her response to it was she doesn't care, and it's not because she's not paying attention, it's because the topic bores her. And I think that what we're up against right now, Mark, is we live in a culture where today when I was at the club, I had the opportunity to get the week off, went to the club early today to run on the treadmill, and they've got a little LCD screen there with cable news, and I'm able to flip back and forth between CNN and Fox News. And what was on all day long, Mark? You tell me, with the Egyptian revolution, millions of people in the streets, one of the largest protests in world history, they're saying, happening today as we speak, happening yesterday. You tell me what you think was on all day long on CNN and Fox News. What do you think they were covering?
My first guess is probably going to be Trayvon Martin, and my second guess is probably going to be Paula Deen.
You're absolutely right. It was Zimmerman on trial, and I wanted to reach through the screen and strangle the people that run those networks, because it just absolutely proves the matrix of propaganda that we're trapped in. That you tell me how that is the biggest story that should be on those networks for more than 5 minutes in a day, much less hour after hour of live coverage of that ridiculous trial. Now, do you think black on black crime is covered? Do you think Hispanic on black crime is covered? Why is that being presented as something that the American people need to focus on? Is it because a white man shot a black man? Because I'm not saying that it's not an important topic to discuss, but it does not warrant, when our Constitution is under threat, when the Bill of Rights is being trampled, when the NSA is doing, every imaginable criminal act against the people, absolutely illegal stuff, and they're reporting on the Zimmerman trial. It's stunning to me that this is the world in which we live. I mean, did you ever think when you were growing up that this would be the America that we live in, where Putin is actually a protector of a guy like Snowden? What are Snowden's crimes? What are Glenn Greenwald's crimes? Because a lot of people in the Mockingbird media are saying Glenn Greenwald should be hung out for giving Snowden a platform from which to blow his whistle. And all Glenn Greenwald is doing is allowing somebody to stand up for the Constitution. Isn't that what a good journalist is supposed to do? Isn't the Fourth Estate supposed to keep the other three branches of government in check by safeguarding the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Isn't that the job of a journalist? That's why I've got this journalism degree, and for years and years and years I was doing marketing, and I'm like, there is no real journalism in this country. With the exception of precious few people, there is no real journalism. And CNN and Fox News and MSNBC are just great illustrations of that point. It outrages me.
Well, I guess thanks to Glenn Greenwald, we did hear a little bit more about Prism than we heard about the people whose doors were being kicked in while they were looking for the single Boston bombing suspect. I saw some YouTube footage of the police going to a house and dragging each person out one at a time, old people, an old woman, an old man, all the inhabitants of the house that were obviously not the suspect that they were looking for. They had rifles trained on them. They made them come out one at a time with their hands on their heads. They would send them down the block, and the guy down the end of the block would frisk each person. I would think that if there were ever a time that you wanted your citizenry to be armed, that probably would have been a really good day for them to be armed, but they were treated like criminals. They were treated like the terrorists. Are the American people ignorant of their Fourth Amendment rights, or do they just not care?
Well, I guess they don't care. And I mean, they're probably ignorant of all of their Bill of Rights. I mean, clearly a good portion of the population is ignorant of their Second Amendment rights, you know, the right to bear arms, and a lot of folks would love to see guns banned because they live under the false belief that if there were no guns on the streets, there would be no crime. And as you and I both know, Mark, if there were no guns allowed to be held by lawful citizens, only the criminals would have the guns. So as far as what the American people think, I don't know. I try to concentrate on what the 5 or the 10%, maybe as many as 20% of God-fearing, decent American people, what they think. Those are the Ron Paul supporters. Now, if we had an honest media by, of, and for the people, if we had an honest government, Ron Paul would be president right now. Ron Paul had all of the backing and all of the momentum, and all of the Mockingbird media turned on him and tried to quelch that at every opportunity, and took every opportunity that they had to try to steal that momentum from him and steal the election from him. So I don't really care what the average American thinks, because if it were up to the average American, we would have been under British rule. We would have never gotten the Constitution. I don't care what the American people at large think anymore, because they're quickly becoming irrelevant. I really truly believe that. I said that recently in an interview with Aaron Dykes from InfoWars, and I asked him what he thought, because as we see millions of people in Egypt march against the puppet put into power by the Western-backed New World Order government, by this country's government, and those people wake up and they actually actively march in the streets because they're sick of their puppet government. I asked Aaron Dykes, are the American people quickly becoming irrelevant? There's only 300 million of us, and there's 1 billion plus Chinese. You know, the Russians seem to be more interested in protecting liberty than most Americans. I think the average American person is becoming irrelevant.
There was a Roman philosopher that said, as long as the people have their bread and their circuses, that they'll be happy and they'll kind of go along with anything. And I suppose we have. We've got Fox and CNN and MSNBC for our circus, and we've got the SNAP program for our bread. So I guess they've got their bread and their circuses, and they just kind of go along with everything. Yeah,
I've always said that. $5 footlongs and Dancing with the Stars. And, you know, that's bread and circuses. And,
that's
you know, if you take a look at Mark Dice's videos, I mean, I don't think that is satire. I mean, I know that we know it's not satire. I don't think that he is selectively editing too darn much. I mean, I could go down to, you know, a local mall and probably get a lot of the same responses, because most people have no idea that we are living on a planet, essentially a starship, hurtling through space and time. They couldn't even tell you we live in the Milky Way galaxy. Most people have no idea who the governor or, you know, the vice president is. And it's pitiful. And, you know, getting back to your NSA wiretapping questions and whether or not people give a crap, Boiling Frogs just did an interview with former intelligence analyst and NSA whistleblower Russell Tice, and he says he knows for a fact that he saw the documents, he held them in his hand, and he said he knows for a fact that he saw documents authorizing the wiretapping of then Chicago Senator Barack Obama. Now think about that. If the American people don't care, it's only because they deserve to lose their liberty, because the NSA, the CIA, these are organizations that are hell-bent in, apparently, according to Russell Tice, manipulating and getting the goods on judges, politicians, senators, congressmen, and then crafting and using that information to get the votes they want, to take somebody who maybe would have voted against Obamacare and maybe nudging them towards a different direction, lest this information be shared with the American public that this person not want to be shared. Do you get my drift? I mean, I think that's what we're up against, and that's pretty much the East German Stasi in a nutshell.
Absolutely. I saw some protest signs in Germany where they were protesting after it was released that the NSA was trying to get information from Europeans as well. And they had a picture of Obama with some earphones on, and at the bottom it said Stasi 2.0. And I thought it was very depictive of what we got going on.
Yeah, and it is. And, you know, we started this conversation talking about government-sponsored assassinations, and I hope that nobody will forget that this government has already assassinated American-born citizens, including Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old American-born son, Abdul al-Awlaki. And this is the world we live in. So I think that the chickens are coming home to roost, and whether that's in a crashing dollar, the world's reserve currency going by the roadside here in the future, or if that's, I mean, it could be exemplified in a number of different ways, not the least of which is us losing our own liberties because we won't stand up, right? We won't make sure, and we won't stand up for others who are being victimized in these illegal, unending, unconstitutional wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And if we won't stand up for the least among us, who's going to stand up for us when this system turns itself on us? And I think that we're in the process, and we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the government targeting individuals and organizations through the IRS based on their beliefs or opinions, that would have been considered conspiracy theory just a few months ago. What other things that are considered conspiracy theory could come to light soon?
I mean, I think that, you could get into areas of talking about HARP and geoengineering. Those are just a couple of things that I'm starting to get a little bit more interested in, but I try to stick with the stuff that I can, really sink my teeth into, and it wouldn't have been very darn long ago that the average American citizen, and believe me, it happened to me for years, would look at you cross-eyed if you were ever to suggest the outlandish idea that the official 9/11 story isn't exactly 100% true. And if you started to go down that path with people, they'd get very uncomfortable and they would think you're a nut. They would think you're a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. If you mentioned the collapse of Building 7 on that day, there weren't 2 buildings that collapsed, there were 3. And if you want to take a look at something that'll knock your socks off, if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, Google World Trade Center 7, and when you watch the collapse of that building, which happened at 5:25 in the afternoon, and it fell in about 7 or 8 seconds into its own footprint, the mainstream media really never discussed the collapse of that building at all. And the 9/11 Commission report had about a paragraph in it regarding the collapse of that building. And that building housed a lot of very suspicious characters, CIA, SEC headquarters, Mayor Giuliani's bunker, number of different things. And I think the point is that as we now see the NSA and the illegal wiretapping and the crimes in Benghazi, and the crimes of the IRS targeting constitutionalists and government-sponsored assassination of American citizens, can't people see what's going on here? I mean, can't people see that what was previously thought tinfoil hat conspiracy lunacy is now being proven through time as conspiracy fact? So I reject the label conspiracy theorist. It's a pejorative. It's only meant to make people not pay attention and run the other way. That's the design of the word, of the phrase. I reject it. We are conspiracy researchers because the world is run by conspiracy, as it was under the Rothschilds in the 17 and 1800s, as it was when they rolled out the Federal Reserve in 1913. This whole thing is a conspiracy, whether it's the conspiracy of Wall Street powers and Prescott Bush, Granddaddy Bush, his son went on to become president of the United States, and his son's son. I mean, Prescott Bush was tasked and recruited to overthrow the U.S. government in an attempted fascist coup in the 1930s with the Wall Street bankers, and it failed, and General Smedley Butler ratted them out and wrote a book called War is a Racket and spent the rest of his life trying to tell the truth, but the Mockingbird media wouldn't report on it. So that's what we're up against. I reject the idea of conspiracy theorists and I reject the label. I think everybody needs to get in tune with truth, and that's what alternative media, your website, my website, and others are trying to do. We're trying to get the word out and the truth out, because whether people want to believe it or not, we live in the Matrix.
That's it. It's a very good analogy, the Matrix. And you just mentioned wars. We're officially getting involved into another war. We're going to start supplying arms to the rebels in Syria. Many of them are linked with Al-Qaeda. I think that we've done that somewhere before in the past. I think it was Afghanistan.
Yeah, in Libya.
In Libya. Afghanistan, when they were fighting, we got involved in something that we didn't have any business with. A lot of the weapons and training ended up getting into the hands of Al-Qaeda, and I think that ended up coming back to bite us in the butt.
Yeah. You know, you bring up a great point about Syria. Now, everybody who's paying attention knows that John McCain, who I personally consider him to be a criminal, he's a criminal senator along with, a long list of others, and he visited the rebels and had his picture taken with some of these Al-Qaeda-backed terrorists. And so under the Patriot Act, he ought to be arrested for crimes, but he won't be, because the Patriot Act was rolled out after 9/11 to essentially, it's prisoner training for the American people. It's turning this system around on us, around on libertarians and constitutionalists and anybody who would dare stand up for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, you talked about Afghanistan. Everybody needs to keep in mind that how did we get into a war with Afghanistan? Well, that was rolled out along with the war in Iraq on the line of 9/11, right? If people don't understand what a false flag operation is, they need to research that. There's countless examples of false flag operations, the Gulf of Tonkin being one of the most famous ones. They lied to get us into the Vietnam War. It's a tried and true technique to take an unwilling people, a peaceful people, into wars of conflict they would otherwise not agree to be a part of. They did it to us. They got us into Afghanistan. Why are we there? Why are we in Iraq? Why did we go into Libya and topple Gaddafi? Why did we help Al-Qaeda take control of Libya? I thought Al-Qaeda was our enemy. I thought that's why we gave up our rights under the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, all on the back of the 9/11 story. And now we're in Syria? Why in God's name are we in Syria? I pay attention to this stuff, and I don't know why we're in Syria. I mean, I couldn't come up with one credible, even if I was trying to use the Mockingbird media and the government talking points, I can't come up with a credible reason that they can cite for us being in Syria. Why are we there? And yet, we're there and we're sponsoring Al-Qaeda. It's just, and what's Al-Qaeda doing? These rebels, these quote unquote rebels in Syria are going in and they're killing men, women, and children. And Christians. And they're eating the hearts and livers out of their enemies. And they're putting those videos out on YouTube and across the internet. And this government sponsors these people? And John McCain travels there to have a photo op with these people? When I say we're living in the Matrix, I'm not using hyperbole. We're entrenched in it. And the reason I say that the chickens are coming home to roost and the American people probably are going to get what they deserve, and I don't wish it on them, I'm fighting every single day to prevent it, is because they won't stand up for the least among us. They won't stand up for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's very clear. Ron Paul has had it perfectly clear for us for decades. All guns pointed outward. We are to protect our own interests in our own country. And yet, what are we doing? Is this part of a larger agenda? Is it the Zionist agenda? Is it big oil? Is it the New World Order agenda? I don't know. I've got a heck of a lot of questions, but what I do know is that it's not the constitutional American agenda. It's not the America I grew up in. It's not the America I would send my boys to go fight a war for, right? And I have sons. They will not fight in any of these unconstitutional, illegal wars of aggression. So I think it comes down to American people waking up, getting fed up, and getting as angry as the Egyptians are. Right? And marching in the streets with millions of people. How is it that the Egyptians have more soul than Americans? They're demanding the resignation of their New World Order Western-backed puppet, President Morsi. What are we doing? How much more criminality will we take from somebody like Barack Obama, who hasn't done one thing that he said he would do, and he's done more bad things, and imprisoned more whistleblowers, and targeted more truth-tellers than any other president in the history of this country, and he's also spent more money than all other presidents combined. How much more will the American people stand for? I don't know. I mean, it's stunning to me.
What do you think about the gold and silver prices lately? Gold and silver have been considered stores of value since Genesis 13:1 says Abraham was rich in cattle and gold and silver. Of course, there's about 12 chapters before that, but for all intents and purposes, that was the beginning of time. The U.S. dollar in its complete fiat form has only been around since 1971, and it hasn't really done that good. It's certainly surprising to see how much gold's fallen in the past month or so.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and silver has been absolutely brutalized for the past 2 years, falling from a high of around 48, 49 down to currently around 18 or 19. But I'm glad we covered all of these other things first, because now the payoff is to talk about real money, constitutional money. And it only makes sense in a society as up and down as, where black is white and up is down as the one we live in which we would have this conversation about gold and silver being terrible investments and performing very badly, in the recent history. And of course that stands to reason, because J.P. Morgan and the criminal cartel banks that have a stake in this fiat debt-based system, these banks that formatted and came up with and are behind the Federal Reserve System, don't want people embracing constitutional money, because, our current system, this currency that we have, this U.S. dollar world reserve currency, is a fiat con game. It depends on our confidence in the dollar. And so by virtue of the paper, silver and gold that Wall Street controls, they can take the price wherever they want. There's a lot of people right now saying that they're finally covering their shorts and they're getting ready to go long. I don't even know if that's true anymore, because I think it's in their best interest to absolutely, keep these metals prices annihilated so that people don't become interested. But I can tell you this. I just interviewed the president of Scottsdale Silver recently, and you can use this. I authorize you to use this quote however you want to use it. I'm going to just play it for you briefly. Here's what he had to say about prices.
Production's still running, but it's interesting to see as silver now has gone below what the cash costs per mine sometimes may show $8-10 an ounce, but when you factor in the whole corporate overhead of most of these primary silver miners, the price is probably closer to 22 to 25 an ounce.
Yeah, so what Josh is saying in that clip is that they push the prices of silver now so low through their paper manipulation. They literally sell billions and billions and billions of ounces of paper silver into the market on a monthly basis, far more than world production can even net in a year. And what he's saying is that now the actual physical real world price of an ounce of silver is lower than it costs the mines to produce it. So it's a very rare mispricing opportunity brought to you by the criminals on Wall Street to buy physical silver. If you would like to do that, I think that's probably a better long-term investment than gold, but both are great. And you're getting a subsidy right now to buy something below the cost of production because of the criminality that's pushed the price this low. That's my take on it, but I'm not going to say that hasn't been an awful experience for anybody that's been buying precious metals just in the past 2 years, because in this case you would have been buying high and now it's worth a lot less. If you've been buying since 2000, 2002, 2004, you're still doing okay because the prices are still higher than they were then. But ultimately, it's been a very, very painful couple of years, and that's because the criminal cartel is doing everything they can to devastate the prices of these metals and to destroy confidence in anything other than the U.S. dollar.
If we do have a currency collapse, even if gold goes to 500 and silver goes to $5, if the dollar goes to nothing, it still would be favorable to be in gold and silver.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree, and I have a bunch of precious metals in physical form, and I don't sweat these downs anymore because I've always said to people, people used to email me all the time, Mark, and say, should I go all in? Should I go all in? Because they'd listen to interviews that others had done, and I did some too. There's some folks, Bix Weir and Lindsey Williams and even Chris Duane, others who would say, you got to get out of your paper now, and I don't disagree with those folks, but the information would be delivered in a way that to a new person it felt like I got to act now today. Everything I've got, I got to buy silver and gold. And when people would email me, should I dump everything I've got and buy silver and gold? I'd always say, no, I think you should dollar cost average. I think you should take this slowly, buy over time, because we don't know where the price is going. Now, I thought it was going to go to 100. I certainly never thought it would crash back down to 18. But I think that is the reason you need a dollar cost average, because as you said, Mark, when this thing finally breaks, when this system finally collapses, and it's a mathematical certainty that it will, because we are 200 plus trillion in debt with unfunded liabilities. When this thing crashes, I think physical precious metals and farmland and tangible goods are going to be the only game in town, because the dollar could definitely be worthless. And Ron Paul just said that recently. He said when priced in dollars, gold could be infinite in price because the dollar will be worthless. And so you got to look at it as an insurance policy to some degree. I think everybody should get some physical metals, not paper metals, physical silver, physical gold. It's very, very rare in physical form. It's 100 times more common in paper form. And actually, I think if we had the real true numbers, it's 1,000 times more common in paper form. So the physical stuff that you might buy and put in your safe or wherever you deem a safe, appropriate place to put it, is very, very, very rare. And that's why they're called precious metals.
You stated that you do expect to see a currency collapse at some point. I know you're probably too smart to speculate and give me an exact time, but when do you expect it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have any prediction on that, because I think a lot of people, like Ron Paul has even said, I'm sorry if people get bored of me always bringing up Ron Paul. I have a lot of admiration for him, but
I do too, absolutely.
Yeah, and he's surprised at the how long the system has been able to be held together. It's a very resilient system. I've actually been really shocked at how much ammo they've thrown at trying to destroy this system. You know, Rumsfeld said the day before 9/11 that the Pentagon couldn't account for $2.3 trillion. Can you imagine that? $2.3 trillion got stolen, and that didn't cause a collapse. It's surprising to me that we could be so many trillions of dollars in debt. I mean, the national debt literally doubling under Obama's watch, and still the markets hold up. Still the dollar holds up. It's a very, very resilient currency. And who knows how long this thing could hold together. A lot of smart people have predicted that it would have collapsed by now. Max Kaiser himself thought it was going to collapse this spring, and it hasn't. So, don't make predictions is what I've learned. I think you just have to, bet on the side of history, bet on the side of gold and silver, because they've been currencies, they've been real money for 5,000 years. And this dollar experiment is very fragile and very young and very long in the tooth.
Besides gold and silver, what are some things that you'd recommend that people can do to prepare for possible tough times in the future?
Well, I should ask you that. I mean, that's really your area of expertise, right? I mean, what do you tell us? Because
our listeners have.
I've got a basement full of food, and I don't even have that much water. What should I do? You tell me.
Well, we have a 7-step preparedness plan. It's a little long and detailed for this interview, but our listeners can always go there and check that out. You can find it on PrepperRecon.com. On the left-hand side of the page under categories, it's the 7-step survival plan. It's a very nice detailed plan, but I like to hear what other people are doing as well.
Yeah. Well, I do too. And, I've had on James Wesley Rawls and others, and I really do try to take the things they say to heart. I think that we all have areas of expertise and areas of interest that we shine in. My friend Mark S. Mann is very into firearms and ammunition, so I've learned a lot from him. James Wesley Rawls and yourself are very into, preparation and food storage and things of that nature, and I try to learn from you guys. Our friend Tom over at campingsurvival.com. So lots of people doing a lot of different things, and I think that the best thing you can do is try to become diversified. Certainly I have probably a little bit more expertise in some areas than others, and I wouldn't put prep up there as one of my top 5 areas of expertise. I would admittedly need to get a little bit more active in that area, and I'll tell you what, man, I fell into the trap of buying. I'm one of those guys who I practice what I preach. I kept buying gold and silver in particular, right up through 48, and right back down to now. And I dollar cost average, and I got a lot that I own in the 40s. Thank God I started to buy some when it was down at 10. But, I'm one of these people that probably should have been diversifying into these other areas more heavily instead of just living in the gold and silver world, because, now I've got losses in those areas in terms of what I spent to buy that physical precious metal. So, I think people need to be diversified, get some storable foods, get some storable water, learn how to use firearms, get the right firearms, get ammunition, and then round it out with some precious metals. I think that that's a pretty intelligent portfolio moving into unknown territory.
I think that's a really good plan. And we'll have a link to SGT Report in today's show notes. We'll also have a link to the Liberty Mill, which aggregates RSS feeds of several other sites that seek to educate and inform and give people a liberty-minded perspective. Can you tell the folks where they can find you? Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I am. We do have a Facebook page, but that actually just, I don't get on there and really make any comments or anything of that nature, but it aggregates out all our feeds from SGT Report, and that's Facebook. We're on there as SGT Report. Should be easy for folks to find. And I'd appreciate it if people would want to stop by to sgtreport.com, or they could check out thelibertymill.com. And we are thinking about adding 3 new links to the Liberty Mill for our daily aggregated content, and Prepper Recon may be one of them. I should. Do I have your permission to add you to Liberty Mill?
Absolutely. I'd be honored to know that our RSS feed's going to show up there.
Yeah, it would be great because you're putting up good content every day, and we'd like to get that out there as well.
All right, Sean. Thanks for all you do in helping to get the truth out, and for taking time to come on the show today.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for having me. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but I really appreciate the time.
Not at all. We appreciate hearing what you have to say.
All right, brother. Take care.
An economic storm is headed our way. The die has been cast. We must spread the word and prepare. The coming collapse will bring a contest between tyranny and freedom. If the patriot is to prevail, we must stand as one, pledge allegiance to our God, and defend the Constitution. If you are new to prepping or would like to learn more, read our 7-step survival plan. You can find it under categories on the left-hand side of our website. Thanks for listening to the Prepper Recon Podcast. God bless, and happy prepping.